the best thing that a father can do for his children is to love their mother.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. I am excited to talk to Luke Henry today, who's our guest. He just reading over his bio. I'm really excited to get into depth about his enjoyment of being a dad and the different visions and mission he has there. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So, Luke, thank you first of all for coming on. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, your family, and then tell us a little bit about your businesses as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam. Looking forward to the conversation as well. So, Luke Henry. I am in Marion, Ohio. I've been married to my wife, Lindsay, for 18 years this weekend. We have two children, 12 and a half and 11, boy, girl, Emerson and Olivia. Our businesses, we have kind of a family of family businesses. So it started out kind of way back. I started a landscaping business when I was in junior high and continued that through high school, college. And then once I had a full-time job, my first full-time job was as a pharmacist. I went to school, I got a Doctor of Pharmacy degree. I was a pharmacist and was still doing landscaping on the side. And with a couple of full-time jobs, didn't have any kids yet, and my wife and I actually thought we were like way too busy back then, and which is sort of funny now. But at the time, we said this is just a little too much. You know, who has two full-time jobs? One of these probably needs to go. And so I had somebody I was going to sell my landscaping business to, and in the 11th hour, decided I couldn't do that, and that I wanted to pursue this life of entrepreneurship, and that I could always go back to being a pharmacist someday if I wanted. And so I quit my job as a pharmacist after working just 2 years and started doing landscaping full time. And that was the beginning of the full on entrepreneurial journey, because I'd never done it full time. I'd always been just on the side. And so jumped into that and haven't looked back. I haven't practiced as a pharmacist now for 6 or 7 years. I actually let my license lapse about 3.5 years ago, and had a little ceremony out my driveway, burned my pharmacy license, and said, I'm not going back to that. I've got plenty else to do. And
you weren't playing around, but you really let that go. Then,
yeah. I sure did. So, but anyway, so that's kind of that. We still have that business today. We employ about 100 people. Have a couple of locations. My wife has not really ever been involved in that business except as a cheerleader, supporter, sounding board through many years. I mean, that's what's paid our bills pretty much all the way through our married life. Back also in college, I bought my first piece of real estate. I bought, I guess, in today's terms, you'd call it a house hack. I bought a house, a 5-bedroom house in our college town, and I rented out the other 4 rooms to friends. And we had that for several years while in college, and then after college, and then also early in our marriage started buying some single family homes, build a portfolio over time. And I'm trying to kind of compress all this into a succinct story. But then 5 years ago was when we really took a leap and decided to me and a business partner buy 8 buildings on 1 block in our downtown of our hometown where we live here in Marion, Ohio, that were vacant or significantly underutilized, and start a movement in our downtown for revitalization. We called that effort and our company Main Street Reimagined. And so we started to become small-time real estate developers. Nice. And along the way, we also again, we can kind of dive into some of the details, but along the way, we've started a whole suite of different small businesses that are tenants in our downtown buildings. So we have an ice cream shop and restaurant, 2 hair salons, 3 wedding and event venues. We just opened a full service Italian restaurant and catering facility. And then we also run the construction and property management for our development, which has now grown to about 20 buildings. in our
Nice.
downtown, which then includes kind of some business development, of course, accounting that we've centralized, and all of that. So along the way, my wife also became a business owner. She stepped in to run one of our ice cream shop, sandwich shop, right before COVID. I asked her to just do a short-term assignment. She's been a stay-at-home mom for most of the time. She was a teacher, and then when we had our first child, she started staying at home, and then had been doing some subbing in our kids' school. And we had a partner that was operating this small restaurant, and he kind of bailed on us. So I asked my wife if she'd do like a short-term step in and help with that, and she agreed. And that was 3.5 years ago that she's been running that business.
Very short term. Yes.
Very short term. Yep. And she then opened a toy store about 10 or 11 months ago. So we have that whole thing going on as well.
So it sounds like you guys really aren't doing much. I think you guys need to step it up a little bit.
Sit around.
Yeah. Yep, I can see that. Yeah, I can see that. Hence you're able to spend a couple hours with me. So,
all right, absolutely.
Man, that is an impressive portfolio of stuff. And honestly, I'm looking at some of this stuff and I'm thinking to myself, well, there is no way the kids are not involved in some of that. I mean, ice cream shops and toy stores. Come on, this is like
absolutely.
You're setting it up to bring the kids into this stuff for sure.
Absolutely,
that's pretty awesome. Before we dig into that part, though, I want to kind of know, like, let's rewind. Like, we've got an idea of who you and your family are, and we'll dig into that a lot more here soon. But going back even farther, let's chat a little bit about like your upbringing with your dad, like where your base was and how you kind of started. Tell us a little bit about your dad and your upbringing, and kind of walk us through your Luke's younger years.
Yeah. So. I think that I was shaped especially by my grandfathers, who were both farmers. And so growing up in the Midwest, having grandfathers that are farmers, and my parents were both grown up in that life, that work ethic and drive, I think, was instilled in me from an early age. And so I look back at that without really knowing it or even thinking about it at the time. I saw my grandfathers, I saw what they did, and the way that they worked, and the stories about all of those things. My dad was not an entrepreneur or small business person. He actually worked for the government, and so kind of took a different road. And I think that I would first of all say that we have a good relationship, and I think it's gotten better even as I've gotten older and really have come to appreciate what it takes to be a dad. I think as a kid, and especially as a teenager, I thought I was smarter than I was. And, as probably a lot of us would say, made some mistakes there. But I've really come to appreciate what my dad has done. He grew up. His parents were divorced while he was fairly young, and his had some abuse from his mom, and I really respect what he did to turn around that dysfunction. And I can look back and see like kind of his healing process, even during my growing up, from what where he was wounded and had some things that needed to be addressed from his childhood, realizing that as he became a dad. And I saw him work through that. I respect what he did. And then, today I think that our relationship is even better as I've matured, and as he's really come around and has, again, just healed from where he started and where he is today. So.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to my dad and kind of what he went through between the abuse and he lost his father when he was like 1, so he had a stepfather after that. And it just, man, like knowing more about my dad, and I think you mentioned that you'd heard the conversation between my dad and I, but the more I got to know about him as I got older, the same thing. Like it gave me a different respect and understanding of who he was and like what he was actually doing for us. It's easy for us as younger folks to just say, hey, these are all the things that we're missing, and not realizing, all the things that they may be emotionally and physically missing that they can't give us, or that they don't have, or that, that they're like the things they're actually doing to actually support us, and we don't realize it until much later. And it's the freedom that it gave me once I started to realize that, and the ability to get a little closer to my dad was just it was very freeing to kind of go through that. And wow, Adam, you're an absolute idiot. I can't believe you didn't, like, you just thought that you were just, it was all about me, and never really thought about it from that perspective. Did you kind of have that same feeling, or was it a little bit different for you when you started to kind of understand a little bit more about your dad?
I think that the realization that I've really come to is that all of us have trouble doing what we haven't seen modeled, right? So we don't know what we don't know. And I look back, and whether it's my parents or whether it's even myself as a parent, I think you look back and you say, well, he didn't know differently because he didn't have it modeled for him. And so therefore, in order for him to learn, it was a great deal of work. He read books and did things with intention, went to conferences on how to be a better dad, about a better husband, a better man. And so, I saw that work and the fruits of that work. And I really respect that, because I'm doing the same thing. There's some areas where, I maybe parent differently than my dad, or, we are different people, and there's things that I've chosen to do differently. And, maybe some areas where I would have liked to have a little more. And so I didn't have it modeled, but with the right intention and with a learning journey, I can fill in some of those gaps and hopefully be a better parent to my kids.
What sort of gaps do you think that you wish you would have had filled when you were younger?
I think probably just more conversation, probably, just a closer relationship, just day to day, hearing about my dad's successes, struggles, and being able to just have conversation about things that were going on with me. And again, it wasn't bad, but it could have been even closer. And I'm sure that he would have enjoyed that more, and I would have enjoyed that more. And so, again, looking back, I realized that he didn't have that with his dad. His dad worked 2 or 3 jobs, was a single parent of 3 boys. Like, he didn't have that close relationship with his dad. And so therefore, while he respected his dad, and again, later in life was a little bit closer with his dad, like, he didn't have that either. So he didn't have it modeled. So therefore, he wasn't able to provide that. And so, I'm recognizing that, and I'm saying, okay, well, in order for me to do differently, I've got to, either look for other people that model that well, or I've got to read books or listen to podcasts or other ways that I can just learn how to do that. Sometimes, again, that may not resonate with certain people because they have that modeled, and so they intuitively do it. But when you don't have that modeled, you have to go out and seek those skills.
So I think all of us are missing something, right? Well, all of us are we have a gap somewhere from something that we wish our parents would have done, or but just the fact that you are thinking through the process of going, okay, well, how can I make sure that my kids don't have that gap? Because all too often you see just that recycle, that same gap missing, that same problem, that same thing that just keeps rolling downhill. And until you have somebody break that mold and break that wireframe that's already built that just keeps getting repeated, like, it's just going to keep going. So now you're the one that's saying, hey, these are some of the things that I feel like I was missing. And then when your kids grow up, they're going to say, hey, these are some of the things I think I was missing. And hopefully we instill the critical thinking into them that make them go, okay, I know that I was missing that. I want to make sure that my kids don't miss that. And it's no offense to us. We're going to be missing things because we don't, we're only trying to fill the gaps that we knew that we missed, and we're not aware of the gaps that we're providing our kids. So,
there are no perfect dads, and every child is different.
You're talking to one, so hold off. Okay, perfect dad of the year over here. No, but no, completely agree. And every child is very different. So, it's especially now that I have a daughter, I had 2 boys and now this little girl, and I'm thinking, like, every day I look at her and I'm like, I don't what I'm going to do as you get older. Like right now, you're only 3 months old, so this is easy. But
right, all of us are learning on the job. So
yeah,
this is,
that's why I want to chat with
it's
people
hard
like
job.
you who've done this before me, and try to steal as much information from you as possible, and hopefully somebody else gets something too. It's a crazy process, and if we don't stop to, I think what I've gathered through some of these conversations is that it seems to be, so I was in the military for a long time, and these types of conversations didn't really happen about how to be better dads, how to be better, husbands, how to, like, it just wasn't, it was always how to be better, how to be a better operator, how to be a better, whatever in the military. And that was it. We drove that, which is, I think, part of the reason why there's such a large divorce rate in the military. But it seems like a lot of, most of the people I'm talking to are entrepreneurs and business owners, and that they're working through this type of stuff. So they're always trying to challenge their thinking and always trying to grow in different ways. And it seems to show up in their family as well. At least, especially with our GoBundance folks, because we have such a wide range of like things that we want to be, what's called whole life millionaire, right? Not just our pocketbook, but in our family and everything too. So, have you found that how long have you been in GoBundance?
Coming up on 2 years.
Okay. Have you found a similar thing in the conversations? Because we tend to get really, especially in our events, we tend to get really deep into some things that I'm just not used to in other groups and communities. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been my experience that everyone that I talk to is working on more than just one sector of their life, more than just one pillar. They're not just trying to build wealth. They're not just trying to have great health. It really is a whole life approach. And I also think that I've seen it, you probably have too, where when someone builds discipline and becomes a lifelong learner, becomes very focused on developing and learning and being curious in one area of their life, it's very common for it to overflow to the others. If I'm looking for excellence in my health and in my marriage, it's going to overflow into my business. It's going to overflow into my parenting, just because I'm becoming the best version of myself. I'm really focusing on that development and that yearning to be the very best version, and it naturally spills over. I see it all the time.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense, really, when you break it down and think about it. But I look back, it's listening to you talk about your dad and thinking about my dad. I think it was also a different time for them too, because it's not there wasn't much drive for sitting down and having conversations with your kids about certain things. At least for many of the dads that I saw, like even my dad wasn't an anomaly in that sense. It seemed as though none of my friends had dads that did a lot of that either. Where it's kind of at least I hope broadly changing to where this is more of a comfortable thing for us to chat with our kids. And that conversation thing you were talking about was something I always felt like I was lacking. I had that with my mom, but never really with my dad, because he was usually working 2 or 3 jobs somewhere else doing something. And I don't think he knew how to be emotionally available, and still a little bit to this day doesn't really know how to be emotionally available and have a conversation that goes beyond, "Hey brother, how you doing?" It hit, like, that part of his body was just completely shut off as a kid, let alone through the military and corrections. So, do you think that was similar for your dad, or do you think it was different reasonings behind it, or where do you think the gap was there?
Yeah, I would say probably similar. That just growing up in the era that he did, and then parenting in the era that he did, it wasn't as common. Maybe not as focused on. And I think it's maybe worth discussing. Like, I do think that I'm concerned that we might oversteer from not having great relationships to, it could be oversteered a little bit to, like, now being friends only and not parents of our children. And so I think that is a line of caution that I look at and, hope that others look at too. I think it's really important to be, close to your child, but it's different than being friends with your child.
Yeah.
We still have to be parents. We still have to be the role model. Our driving motivation can't be being liked. We can't have our kids meeting our emotional needs.
Mm-hmm.
We can enjoy them. We can love them. We can just have the most fun with them. That's awesome. But I think that there is a toxic level of closeness to kids. Maybe that's not the right term, but just where I see parents that are just like slave to their kids' schedules and their kids' emotions. And it's like, wait a minute, like who's the parent here and what are you doing to model for them? Are you setting them up for success? Because ultimately, like that's what we're doing. We're raising kids that are going to become adults and they've got to one day be parents. And so we've got to be teaching them these things. And that's hard. That's hard sometimes. It's not easy and it doesn't always feel good.
Yeah. No, I love that you're saying that. I have seen way too many times that, and maybe it's because I'm biased in one direction or another, but to me, it feels like I see that more in single parent households with the mom. The mom being there, like it's I think emotionally, like they want to do everything they can to support their child and prevent them from being hurt further as a single parent household. And then like that makes it very difficult to bring in the discipline and bring in the like, no, I'm still the parent, and they just want to be able to help their kid. But I mean, I still see it with dads too, that are just like, hey, I want to, especially with their sons, like I want to be the cool dad or do something. And it's like, no, like you still got to be the dad. Like there still has to be structure. Like, I mean, I love going out and like right now it is really downpouring. Right now it's downpouring outside. I love to be able to run out in the rain with my son and have a great time. And the boys running around doing silly things and jumping in the pool while it's downpouring and, climbing trees together. And like, as long as my back is capable of doing it, but there still has to be a point where I say, son, you're done. Like we need to fix this issue and be a parent. I think that the oversteer, I'd love, you said we can go dig down that. So I'd like to actually. Can you show some examples, like maybe whether it's in you or some that you've seen on the actual oversteering? Because I know that I've seen it myself, and I'd love to kind of see where we might be, where the line might be getting crossed, and make sure that we're not going down that ourselves. Because I mean, I told you before this, I love my kids to even be able to come in while I'm having a podcast, right, and be able to say hi to people. Okay, well, I mean, is that I'm not trying to say that is too lax, but am I being too lax in some of these things that I'm just like letting my kids have too much of the freedom and too much like, hey, no, we're best buddies here at the house, So it's something for me to think about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I certainly don't think that that's necessarily an example, but I think that some that come to mind just offhand would be just where there's like parents that watch their kids be disrespectful to another kid, whether it's a sibling or whether it's a friend or someone like that, and don't give correction, or see them be disrespectful to an adult and don't give correction because they don't want to make their kid mad or don't want to have them throw a fit. And it becomes more about the parent's comfort than what's ultimately best for the child, which is getting that feedback, getting that important correction so that they know what behaviors are acceptable. And we're not just talking toddlers either. I mean, this can be teenagers or beyond. Other kind of more egregious examples are just, I was talking with one of my team members and he was telling me about that he just had his son graduated high school, and he said there was plenty of graduation parties that he went to for his kids as friends where the students were openly drinking at the graduation party, 17, 18 years old. And the parents were like totally fine with it, and I just feel like that's another example of it's just like, whoa, like why are you not willing to be a parent? Why are you not willing to have appropriate boundaries, like, morals or ethics aside? I know those may vary from one family to another, but, just legally and safety wise. So, that's a bit of an extreme example perhaps, but you see some like nuggets of that even when kids are younger, with just permissive behavior and not wanting to correct just because it's hard, just because it's going to cause the child to throw a fit, or you're going to have to deal with something that you don't have to deal with. I mean, we've all been there, and it's a fork in the road where it's like, well, I'm either going to set what I have the saying that what you allow, you encourage. So I'm either going to encourage this behavior in the future by not correcting it, or I'm going to take this hard action now to prevent more of these situations down the road and give correction, discipline, feedback, and have a discussion as a parent.
I think you mentioned that the drinking one was probably a more egregious one, but I think that to your point right now, if you don't nip it in the bud at the beginning, it turns into the egregious one. And there was one guy, Anthony Graff, that I was I think his episode just recently got released, or it's going to be soon. But he was talking about like when you have I forgot the age groups that he had, but basically there's like instilling discipline years, and then like the growth years, like the individual growth years being later on. And if you're trying to do the instilling discipline at that 14-year-old range where they're supposed to be learning individual growth,
right,
you probably missed the boat on some of that, because now you're ruining your ability to be able to have that friendship with your kids later on at 20 years old, because now they're remembering you just being a jerk and not letting him do it, like because you failed to instill the discipline earlier. And to me, I try to remember that as like, I mean, even yesterday as an example, a minor example, but the kids we were getting ready to deep fry some churros in the house, which it was a bad idea. I got some bad burns on my arm, by the way. But so we're deep frying some churros, and the boys were horseplaying in front of the thing, and that was one of those where I love horseplaying with my boys. Like, I think that tossing them around the house and it just lights my life up. Like, it's so much fun. And you can see it light theirs up, but there has to be a point where I go, no, this is not the time. Like, we're standing in front of like boiling grease, or boiling oil, and like quickly I jumped on them, and both of them were like, whoa, like they, snapped up quick. They knew that like daddy was serious. It's time to go. And then sure enough, my exact example like happened. Like the oil blew up all over my arm, literally like 10 minutes after I talked to him about it. And I was like, this is why we don't horseplay in front of these things. Like this was just pure accident. We put some stuff in and it boiled over, or it flew out. But if you don't nip it in the bud, like all of a sudden they're, having massive drunk fests at the house while you're standing there going, how did we get to this point? And again, ethics and morals aside, I mean, if that's something that you want to do with your kids, it is what it is. I'm definitely not going to judge that, but man, oh man, like it is very important to get that in early, I think. And maybe that's the military guy in me talking to, I don't know.
Yeah, really good point. And I have seen that same, like kind of chart with the different ages and stuff. And I that's a great reference, is because if you get to things too late in the process, the ship's kind of already sailed and it's already going in a direction, and it's going to be really hard to turn that ship. The other part of that is, and I've read this, and I'm probably not going to articulate it as well as the whatever book I read that talked about this, but I think that it's the same with the relationship. So we're talking about like the discipline and then the relationship. Both of those have to be instilled like early on in the child's upbringing, as early as possible. And ideally, that starts at birth and is continuous and goes right through the teen years. And so when you're giving the discipline or giving the correction and keeping them on a path, to understand proper morals and proper boundaries and those sorts of things, like it becomes not very easy, but easier through those teen years. Similarly with the relationship, you've got to have the relationship to be able to give the correction, and that's what helps build the trust. And similarly, like you can't start trying to build that relationship. It's going to be much more difficult if that doesn't start until the teen years or the young adult years, because now, again, they're already on a path. Whereas when you build that relationship early on, it just really primes the pump for the important conversations and discussions and the trust that's already built when those teen years come along. And I'm really starting to feel this because my son just started 7th grade yesterday, and I feel like we're right on the precipice of more and more of these just tough friend situations and girlfriends and just all of those school things that think back to your teen years, and today it's so much more challenging. I want to have that trusting relationship with my son, and I've been very intentional with trying to build that for us to be in a place where when he encounters a sticky situation or a tough situation, or he's had a tough day, somebody said something, or he got dumped by a girlfriend, like, I'm going to be there to be able to talk with him about it. And I know there'll be a day will come that he might be more likely to go talk with a friend about that, but I hope that still somewhere in that process he comes to old dad and we're able to talk about it, and I'm going to be able to keep sharing wisdom with him, and I have been doing that for some time now, and so I hope that it will be very natural for that to happen when that time comes.
And I think that speaks to the fact that you were saying that you wish that you had some more of those conversations with your dad. So the fact that you're setting that up now, you mentioned you are intentional about having those, having that opportunity for those conversations open. Can you talk me through some of that intentionality and what that's been looking like over the last, the 12, 13 years?
Yeah. So especially for us, it's always been a bedtime routine. So that is like started when my kids were very young. And I mean, that's every night. I tuck them into bed. I mean, we're talking, I don't travel a lot for my job. I mean, I go to GoBundance events and a handful of, conferences and things like that. But we're talking 350 some days a year anyway. I kneel beside their bed before we go to bed. And I mean, we just talk for a while. And now less so. Again, my kids are 5th and 7th grade. And so, but up until honestly just maybe a year or two ago, I mean, we would sit in bed and like read almost every night for 15 or 20 minutes. And then we would sit and talk. And that's where we started, especially as my son got into upper elementary and middle school, we would have some more of these just opportunities to just ask, about his friends and ask how he's feeling about school. And if he seems a little bit off, what's going on, and trying to open up and get him to ask questions and feel comfortable having those conversations. And then my wife does the same with my daughter, and then we switch. And and so I have always read with my son, not so much with my daughter. It was my wife would, and then we would switch. But we still have a time to talk, and that's oftentimes when we would connect. And so I think that that's been a long time of trying to build that space for connection and discussion, especially of like more sensitive issues. And then also, just about a year ago, I wish we would have started a long time ago, but about a year ago, we started doing like family board meetings, so if you're familiar with that concept from the book, but just one-on-one dates basically with each of our kids. And that was something that I never did with my parents. And, again, up until recently, we didn't do with our kids. We spent a lot of family time together, but it would often be the four of us. And so it's just been really amazing. Like when I'm just one-on-one with my son, one-on-one with my daughter, the depth of conversation and the difference in connection than if there's 3 or 4 of us riding in a car. And even if we're talking, or we eat dinner every night together pretty much, with some exceptions, but it's been something that's been another like very sacred family ritual. And even there, I mean, we try to incorporate some conversation about faith or our growing up or different things like that. And but even there, it's not even the same level of connection as that one-on-one. So if somebody listening is not doing that, man, I just can't recommend that enough. It doesn't have to be super structured. Just that quality one-on-one time. Go hang out a little bit, have dinner, do it. Go putt-putting, or go paint pottery, or make a candle, or throw a baseball or whatever, like just do something and hang out. And it's really cool.
Yeah. I have failed miserably. I've put that on the calendar 3-4 times, and I failed miserably at actually
I did for a
accomplishing
long
it.
time too, so it makes you feel better.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But I appreciate you trying. That's, but it is, to me. It's like I try to take advantage of so my son, my oldest, likes to golf. My middle likes to golf as well. So both of the boys like to golf, but the 4-year-old doesn't like do competitive golf at all right now. My 8-year-old does. So I'm his caddy oftentimes. So I take those 4 hours to just, hey, it's you and me, buddy. Like, let's just have a conversation. Like, obviously we're talking mostly about golf, but things come up, and just being open and have a conversation and waiting for your next shot. And like it's solid. But I think that the other night, my son asked me, he was getting ready for bed, and, we don't have as intentional of a time sitting down before bed, but we definitely have conversations before they go to sleep, and, talk them in every night that I'm home. And, but he asked me, he says, "Daddy, I don't really know if I should even be asking this question." And that always hurts me, because I want to make sure that he never, ever, ever feels like he shouldn't be asking a question,
right.
But when it came down to it, he was like, how do I actually believe in God? Like, sometimes it's really hard to believe in God, and sometimes it's really easy. And I said, well, what makes it easy and what makes it hard? He's like, well, I mean, I don't know. I look outside and think, how is all of this created if there isn't a God? Like, this doesn't make any sense. He's like, and then I just think, well, how is there just this person that I don't know that just did all this? And I was like, but this is a great conversation to have, and I want you to have all these questions. And so they were already in bed. I was already out the door. And then there was one last, hey, I need to go potty. So I went back in, and the 4-year-old goes potty. And then this question came out, and I was like, yes. So we spent another 15 minutes just sitting there talking and, being open to that conversation, despite the fact that I was exhausted and wanted to go to sleep, but I had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning. And I was like, no, let's do this. Like, let's have these conversations. And, you mentioned faith, and that's what my popped in my brain as my son asking me about God. And I was like, this is great. Like, I really hope that I can keep that alive for ever, I don't want it to, like, there's always a fear in the back of my brain that somehow I'm going to screw something up and they're not going to want to ask me questions anymore, or we're not going to, I'm not going to be as inviting for this type of thing later on. But man, it's I don't know if it's an irrational fear or a very rational fear, but it's there,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. I don't know for sure either, but I'm going to try to keep the door open for those, and and I've said very intentionally too, to my son and my daughter, I want you to know that you can always ask me anything, and I won't freak out. That's like a commitment that I've made to you. I've heard this a while back. I think it was Andy Stanley talked about it. His thing is, his rule that his wife and him had were, they made that promise to their kids that they wouldn't freak out. And so I extended that same kind of promise and invitation to my kids, just to say, listen, I don't want you to, if you hear something at school, if you see something, like, I don't want you to go Googling it. I don't want you to, like, feel like you can't ask it. I don't want you to feel embarrassed or stupid. I want you to be able to ask your mom or I, because we are always on your side, and we want to talk through stuff with you, and we're going to give it to you straight. So you ask and we'll answer.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that it's unbelievably important to be able to leave that avenue open. And I never felt like I had that, like, avenue perfectly open for me. I never felt like I could ask those questions or go through an uncomfortable conversation. So hopefully I can leave that door open for the kids. But let's go over to your businesses for a minute, just so I can we can wrap back into that. So you start off in pharmacy. Let me take that back. You do start off in landscaping. You start running that early on in life. What led to the landscaping side of the house at a younger age? So I'll say this has multifold. Partly very selfish, because my nephew just got his first job. I've got a 16-year-old niece and nephew they're twins, and then I've got a couple other nieces and nephews. But this particular one, he just got his first job. 16 years old, got his permit, got his first job at McDonald's, And he keeps asking me a lot of questions about businesses and things that I do and investing and all that type of stuff. So I'm trying to get on a call with him to convince him to do something. Not that McDonald's is going to be a bad job for him. I think it's going to teach him a lot of, if nothing else, he can learn a lot of systems and understanding how these things work and learn the processes involved with it. But I also want to encourage him to think about things like landscaping. That's one of the ones that I wanted to say, hey, like, I'll even pay for your riding lawnmower and you can go road to road and we could split the profits until I'm paid off, and then et cetera, right? But what got you into landscaping? How did you get started into that? And obviously still have been continuing it for, X amount of years. So what led you to go down that path?
Honestly, I guess looking back, I credit some of that to my dad. He really loved the outdoors. Again, his dad was a farmer. He didn't take that path, but he definitely had an appreciation for nature, found a lot of peace in nature. We would go on hikes, and he knew like all the trees. He would always like point out all the trees. And we had this thing when I was younger that I think my mom kind of drove it, but my parents, we moved every like couple years. We always stayed like around the same town, but we moved, and every time we would move into a new house, my dad wasn't like super handy, so he wasn't doing like a lot of the home improvements, but he would always re-landscape the house, and I would always help him. And so I just came to enjoy that. And when I was old enough, he taught me to mow the yard. And so I was doing some of that. And then so when I was in junior high, I had a great aunt and uncle. They were in like their 80s or 90s, and they needed their yard mowed. And so I was voluntold that I would go over and do that. And so I did. And the first time I did it, it took me 2.5 hours to mow the yard. I used their mower, 2.5 hours, and it was a riding mower. And I just loved it. I was 12, 13 years old, and loved that roar of the mower, feeling the power of the engine and the smell of the fresh cut grass. And I was like, man, this is a good deal. And when I was done, they gave me $5 for 2.5 hours worth of work. And so I was like, do you need me to come back next week? And they said, man, didn't do too bad. Yeah, why don't you do that? So I did it week after week. And then after that summer, I had saved up maybe a couple $100 or something. And so I was a saver. That was instilled by my parents. So I saved up, and the next spring I mowed for them again, but then I also went out and I found a used lawnmower at a garage sale, and I bought it. And so then I started mowing for some other people who didn't have a mower that I could use. And so I was charging, $10 or $12 for those jobs. And then that started to compound, and just kind of kept buying a little more equipment and a little more equipment, and growing it organically over time.
Nice. That always seems to be, it sounds so simple in my brain how those work. I mean, when I was younger, I did a lot of shoveling of snow. It was, when I was in high school, I was in upstate New York, so we got lots of snow. So I would just walk around shoveling people's snow. But I never put the pieces in place to like make it a consistent thing. Hey, every time it snows, I'll be out. So how did you get to the point of like, hey, I've got 3 yards that needed to go, to, hey, I'm going to make this a business. I'm going to keep coming back to do this. What, did somebody walk you through that, or was it just kind of intuitive for you to make that happen?
Yeah, I think once I had done a few like just one-off jobs, kind of like what you're talking, and just like got paid, I was like, I'd like to do more of this. And it seemed like you could do it every week. And so I need to get some of that. And so actually I had a friend that was mowing a couple of lawns for a property manager, and he didn't want to do it anymore. He was turning 16. He was getting a car, and he was going to go get, a real job. And I was like 14 or 15. And so I was like, well, I'll take him over. So he was like, hey, if you want to do them, then you just take them over, and you can bill them, and you can get paid. They want them mowed once a week. And so I just started mowing them. And my parents would take me around. They would like drop me off. Some of them were like close. So like they would drop me off at 1 and then be like, hey, see you in 2 hours. And I would just finish mowing and, and string trimming and have my gas can, and I would just pile it all on top of the mower, and then I'd walk down to the next place and do that one, and then do another one, and then sit there if my parents weren't there, and when they'd come and pick me up, and I'd put the mower in the back of ye old minivan, and they would take me home, bring me back the next week. So that was like for the first couple of years, like how it went. So I'm grateful for them for helping along that way. We didn't live in town, so I couldn't have like walked to these places or gotten to them by myself. And then I bought my first vehicle before I turned 16 and had a trailer and a little bit nicer mower at that point. And then when I turned 16, I was off to the races. So I wasn't limited by their schedule or the geography of only mowing things on the same street. So I started picking up more and more and just kind of growing it from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, just having the parents being able to drop you off and doing that is one thing. But yeah, when you mentioned your friend that let you take over his route, basically, it was one of those like, man, if only he knew that was a business that he could actually sell as opposed to just handing over, and that's something, I don't know how old he was or you were at that point, but I mean, yeah, that's one of those like a true business that, hey, I've got a book of business now that I can sell somebody to keep this route going. And that's one thing I'm trying to, we just started homeschooling this year, and one of our homeschool projects is going to be some entrepreneurship stuff. He's going to be building out his, it's been something I've been wanting to do for like 6-8 months. I've been talking about doing this, and it's still on my to-do list, like to review some documents for this. And it has been on my to-do list for literally like 8 months, 6 months. He has set up a vending machine route. And it can be making money, and then we can actually sell the business and do the thing. So now this is going to be part of his math, part of his entrepreneurship, part of his social sciences, to be able to learn all of this stuff and how to build a little business. So, and I told him that this is going to be on the docket for this year. So I'm looking forward to it. So we did some of that as well, and it was a really fun learning experience. So in I think it was 2019, the first year my son did, we planted like a sweet corn patch. And it was kind of my son's project, and so he was responsible for sort of overseeing it, but it was a bit of a family project overall. But he, with some help from his sister, picked all the corn when it came due, and then he sold it, and that business was called Emerson's Ears, his sweet corn patch. And so he would like record a little commercial inviting people to purchase, and he'd say what the price was, and then he had a different price if you just bought it as is, or then he would also husk it for you and sell it, ready to eat. And so he made that commercial. We posted it on Facebook, and then we kind of tallied the orders. He would get the names. My wife would write them down, and he and Olivia would bag it all up, put the person's name on it, and then there'd be kind of a pickup location, and it was a bit of a system. So then we had a bad year or so in there, and then last year we had a decent year again, and he actually wanted to have a website. And so he went on GoDaddy or wherever and purchased emersonsears.com. And he was like asking me like how to build a website. I said, son, I don't know. You're talking to the go
wrong
to
guy.
Fiverr, have somebody build it for you.
Yeah. It's like I know the general process, but like in terms of like pointing and clicking and making it look good, like it would look, I'm sure, really lame if I did it. So he just went on and like watched some tutorials on website building on GoDaddy, and like a few hours later he came down. He said, Dad, I got a website built. You want to see it? And I was like just shocked. So it was great. Yeah. So then last year he linked it to like a Google form that he had created. And so he took his own orders. It would send him an email, and then he would reply to their email and say when the order would be picked and ready. And then that was the plan again this year, but we had some unfortunate events with some geese, of all things, getting into the sweet corn and eating it all before it, like the actual plants, not the ears, but the plants before they got grown up. So we didn't get a harvest this year, but it was a great learning experience. He learned tons about entrepreneurship through that. And then my daughter in 2020 did, when masks were like such a thing, she did this she wanted to tie dye some. She wanted some before, every store had those, like very
Mm-hmm.
early on. She was like, I want to like tie dye some and like make them look cool. So she like tie dyed these masks. And then we were having at the time at one of our venues, a series of like handmade markets, like craft show type things. And
Mm-hmm.
so she like got a booth at the craft show and she sat there and she sold them and she would make change. And I mean, she was only 8 years old at that
Yeah.
time. And so that was a great experience. And then as we kind of mentioned, they've also worked in our businesses as well, but that's an even different experience than kind of
Yeah.
having their own thing and developing a product and talking about what the price would be and understanding like profit and tallying up their profits and splitting and paying back their loan from mom and dad for the raw
Mm-hmm.
materials. And so it's led to some really fun conversations, just like what you were talking about that you want to do. It really
Yeah.
is a great learning experience.
That's phenomenal. I was actually going to ask if you were getting your son into lawn mowing, and then here you go, and he's already doing some stuff. Your daughter's been doing stuff for a couple. That's awesome. So did you help him like build business plans and stuff like that, or was it more just conversational and piece by piece as it goes?
Yeah, it was a little just more like conversational. I
Yeah.
wanted them to kind of drive it. I didn't want to
Mm-hmm.
overcook it, especially at 8 and 9 years old.
Yeah.
If my son now at almost 13 wanted to do something, I think he would be ready for that level of conversation. Um, but yeah, it was just they kind of had an idea, and I said, okay, we talked about, well, what do you want to price them at? Here's what your costs are going to be, and then you've got to account for some of your own labor, and you need to make some money on the work that you're putting into it, and then make what's called a gross profit margin, and so
Mm-hmm.
we talked about all that. So yeah, it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
That's awesome. Yeah. I looked at the vending machines and I was like, man, it's like what a perfect supply and demand type of conversation that you can have, and literally create a business and be able to sell it. And I'm invested in a coffee company, and I think to myself, like, man, like the weather can completely ruin your entire profit for a year. Like almost like farming is just an extremely volatile type of environment. But is that something that I would have never thought geese, right? But I'm thinking through the conversations. Like, what did the conversations go like when the whole crop was lost with the volatility of, in this case, it was geese instead of weather. But you had, it sounds like, a couple years throughout those last 4 that have kind of had some issues. But how did you guys go about those conversations, and what was your son's plan and your plan to kind of work through those for the future years?
Yeah, we haven't talked too much about contingency going forward. We need to. I think he's kind of was bummed and had sort of
Yeah.
lost interest, and it is this like delicate balance of, hey bud, see, that's little Adam,
I told
right?
you. Yep, this is little Adam.
Okay, all
He's
right.
talking about his son's business right now. His son has a business called Emerson's Ears, where he grows ears of corn and sells it to people. You want to hear about it? There we go.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that it's this like delicate balance of like sometimes these are like as much on the parents as they are on the kids, just because they're limited as to what they can really do. I mean, we talked about the idea of like, well, you've got distribution channels in place, son, that there's people that want to buy from you. And so, if you're selling retail, like you could partner with someone who would sell to you wholesale, and then you could still make a margin. And, I think he at least kind of understood what I was saying and getting the idea. But then he was also like, well, okay, like who's that going to be? And like, how are we going to get a hold of them? And how are we going to get the corn from there to here? And I was like, yeah, that is a lot of logistics that fall on your parents' shoulders. So we did not pursue that, but we at least kind of talked about like what some of those contingency
you had the
plans.
class. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's one thing I talked to Adam about with the vending machine thing. It was like, all right, well, like there's going to be a difference between going to 7-Eleven to buy Doritos versus Walmart to buy Doritos versus Sam's Club to buy Doritos. And like that goes to like the whole and
economies of scale.
What part of the economies of scale? Like when you buy 300 bags of Doritos, it comes in a lot cheaper than when you go to 7-Eleven and buy it for $4. And then I get to charge $4 for it out of my machine, and I only paid $1.05 for it. So to me, like it's so much life lessons that you can build into different business stuff. Even if Adam or Emerson never decide to actually go into business, the ability to logically think about those types of things and understand supply and demand, even when you go to buy something for yourself or your house, like just knowing that stuff to me is invaluable. I mean, I never had any experience, and if you would have asked me even 10 years ago that I would be running businesses and talking to my son about building routes and all this stuff, there would have been no way I'd have ever thought that would be happening, especially given where I came from. But I think that the exposure to that is phenomenal. Where are you going? Give me my headphone back, you little punk. You little punk. So now he's going to try to listen in on the whole conversation over there. But I think that it's I don't know. To me, it's invaluable, and maybe it's just because of how excited I am now about businesses and what I do that it makes sense to me. But especially as homeschooling, like the amount of math I could teach doing this, the amount of education he's going to be able to get in the hours that I have with him at home, and not to mention I get to build some businesses and get some profit myself too. Don't get me wrong, but man, it's awesome. What other businesses are your kids involved in? Not necessarily in your businesses yet. I'm going to ask that in a second. But are there any other businesses that they've been talking about wanting to build or do, or are these mainly what they've been doing?
Yeah, that's been kind of the extent of it. I mean, beyond that, they're just working some with us in our like family businesses, and we are talking more, my wife and I, about like how that they are getting older and like they understand the basics, how can we expose them to some of the stuff kind of behind the curtain, not just necessarily like working on the retail side of things, but even understanding like going over a P&L with them and explaining again a little more in depth the idea of different income streams, expenses, margins, profits, some of that terminology that I mean, when I started, even like I didn't understand that stuff. I just knew that it, took me a little bit of time, and I made $15 a week, like mowing this lawn. And it's only been, I've never taken a business class in my life. And so it's really been just reading books and listening and going to conferences and learning about working with consultants and accountants and all that as well. But learning like how to do business and what all these different terms mean. And I couldn't imagine if I would have had a head start, like actually understanding this stuff from a young age and intuitively being able to look at an opportunity and determine if it's going to be profitable and where the opportunities lie and if there's value add and different things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what did you and your wife come to then on having those conversations? Have you guys decided how you're going to have the conversations, or what you're going to, how you're going to include them in that?
Yeah, not anything like specifically. We haven't like outlined a curriculum or anything like that, but just to say like, hey, they're getting a little older, and I think that as those opportunities arise, for example, if I have if I'm closing on a new building, or if I'm going to meet with my accountant, or if I'm going to meet with a banker, to take one of the kids along and just say, hey, why don't you watch this process and just see what it's all about? Because until I was here, like as a big kid, I didn't know what any of this stuff meant, or what you did or what you're supposed to do. I just learned by showing up and figuring it out as I went.
Yeah. I recently took Adam and the whole family up to, we've got an assisted living facility that we invested in. And so we brought them up there to kind of show them how this process works and what kind of rehabs we're doing and what kind of things we're looking at. And because to me, I mean, just that minor exposure to me is phenomenal in having those conversations. But yeah, I want to, I don't know. Part of the reason I was asking is because I'd love to steal your ideas. If you had an idea on how you were going to expose them to those types of, those types of education. And I'm wondering, like, I could even make some of those vocabulary words for this year. Like, what is gross profit margin? Here's your vocabulary. This is our entrepreneur class, But I mean, I don't know if I'll be building a curriculum or anything, but, I'm getting ready to start I've been working on being more intentional with my calendar. I'm going to have to be with the homeschooling, right? Because there's certain hours that I'll be I'm going to put in a couple hours in the morning, make sure that it's getting done a couple hours throughout the day as needed. But being more intentional, I think, with my business calendar is going to help me even more with them as well, because I want to be able to bring them in and say, hey, I'm going over the P&L today, right? Come on in.
Mm-hmm.
Let's learn what a P&L is. Let's learn how ask me whatever questions. You can just watch what Daddy does and just ask me questions. I'm not going to sit here and make a class out of it, but you just you get to see it. And if you have questions, then I'll talk to you about it, okay. So anyways, the businesses that you have now, how much involvement have they had in your family businesses, and what has that looked like thus far with the kids?
Yeah. So going back, like when they were real little, they got a little exposure to the landscaping business, like occasionally, especially my son. I would take him into the office from time to time. He would, maybe sit in a meeting or just hang out with me for a half a day or something like that. My wife had something going on. They have both ridden around with me plowing snow, and so they would get to see what that process looks like, or they would get to shovel sidewalks while I plowed or whatever. And so kind of allowing them to see a little bit of what that takes and the hard work that our team members put in, and really just involving them in conversations like that to say, hey, that like tonight we're going to have like 60 people out working all night, and they're not going to go home and get to see their families, and like that's what pays our bills. And so we want to make sure that when we see those individuals, like we thank them and we're respectful to them, and just having some of those conversations to understand that, like, as a business owner, as a leader, like we're not over our people, we are under our people. We are there to serve, and trying to instill that level of understanding about leadership and what it takes to have team members and take care of them and see them as people and all of that. So that's definitely been something that we've tried to kind of instill from a young age. And then more recently, the last 3 or 4 years, again, my wife's been involved in running the ice cream sandwich shop and then opening her toy store. And my kids have been really involved with those. And so they would work there quite a bit. And we, during COVID in particular, we had just opened an event venue, which was terrible timing. And that's a whole story. But long story short, we weren't able to have weddings and corporate events as we planned. And so this wedding venue was like 2 doors down from our ice cream shop. And so basically we were running it as a pop-up restaurant. We couldn't have events there, but we had plenty of space, so we could space people out. We'd have live music. We'd have the garage doors up and have people at tables. And then my wife and kids and some of our team would take the orders and everything and then take them down to the ice cream shop, because the event venue doesn't have a kitchen, and they would make all the food there. And then my kids were like the food runners. They would come and they would pass out the food at the different tables, and they made some tips. And so they were like super jazzed about that. And they would work then just day to day or work big events. My daughters ran the cash register since she was 8 or 9 years old, can count back change. We taught them how to do that. There's lots of adults that can't do that. So the people were always impressed, and she would get tips for doing that. And I've always said that I believe that everyone should have to work retail or food service sometime in their life, just because it gives you such an appreciation for the different types of people, how difficult it can be to please people, how to greet people, how to carry on conversation, how to just work with the public. And so my kids have gotten that from a young age. So it's been lots of fun to see them do that. So they've worked in them. They've stacked boxes. They've taken out trash. They've wiped tables, swept floors, all that sort of thing. And so it's been really just kind of a part of their growing up. And they've enjoyed it. And I think to some extent they haven't known a lot different, but they know that they're a little bit different in that not everybody has that experience, but
Yeah, no kidding.
it's definitely given them some great at bats.
Do you get them like, IRAs or anything like that? Do you have any of that set up for them already, or have had any of those conversations with them?
Not necessarily. The only thing is that we opened some savings account for each of them, where when they've done these little businesses, they've been able to keep a percentage of the profits for themselves to buy trinkets or PlayStation games or whatever, and then the rest got put in the savings account to be used for another investment opportunity in the future. So they still have those, and that's the intent of those, is to go and invest in something that way. So I've thought even about, obviously this is going to be more than what the money they have, but kind of like partnering with my son, or even just allowing him to be part of like a real estate deal, like a small single family or duplex or something, to say, hey, let's kind of like do this together, from the standpoint that we're going to find it, we're going to walk through it, we're going to go through the whole process of financing, and like kind of doing the underwriting and developing a rehab budget, and then overseeing the rehab and some of that. So we haven't done that quite as in depth, but they have been through a lot of our projects as they've went through the process. They've seen them before we've done any renovations. During, they've went on lots of trips to Lowe's and the lumber yard and stuff like that, and helped pick out fixtures and push carts of cabinets and stuff like that. So they've just kind of always been in and around what we're doing.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that the inclusion is like, let's take the education part aside, like just spending that time and seeing how mom and dad earn a living and the work that it takes, and you're building that relationship we were talking about earlier, while also instilling discipline without being a disciplinarian. So I think it's such a multifold environment that you've created to allow that. So one thing I wanted to jump down as well, when I was reading over your bio in the sheet, you had talked about wanting to hit, I think it was 30 different baseball fields. Is that what it is? Is there 30 of them?
Yeah,
Major League Baseball
30
fields.
Major League Baseball parks. Yep.
And you were talking about the end of the summer. I think you said it was going to be, you're going to have 2/3 of them already knocked out, and you want to do this by the time Emerson's 18. So how did that kind of get started, and what does that look like to accomplish that task?
Yeah, we've always liked baseball. I grew up playing baseball. When my wife and I got married, she wasn't like super into baseball, but she actually developed a real love for it. And so we would go to games and stuff before we had kids. And then when we had kids, we continued going. And then my son started playing baseball. And so it was just kind of like something we enjoyed doing. And I was at a conference. I actually don't even remember what it was specifically, but it was like kind of one of those, like, just sit and dream of like what you want for yourself, for your family. And somewhere I just had this idea that it would be really fun to like set a big goal like that, to go to all the Major League Baseball parks. I know people that went to several and talked about the different ones, and seemed like, yeah, I want to do that. That would be really great. So at the time, my son was eight, and so it was another one of those moments where it's like, man, 10 years, he's going to be grown up and leaving the house, most likely. And so we got 10 years to do this. So if we want to do this goal, there's 30, 10 years, so that's 3 a year. And I think that we could achieve that. So I talked to my wife about it. She loved the idea. And so I found online a big map that you could buy. It has all of the different ballparks and where they're at in the United States. And then there's little red pins that you put in for each one that you do. And we got it personalized to say the Henry Family Baseball Park Quest. And we presented that to the kids and told them that our goal was to go to all 30 and to see the country along the way. And so we started that 5 years ago. It was 2018. And got a couple of years in. We lost a year to COVID there, of course, when there was no baseball. And so, yeah, as of a week or two ago, we went to our 21st stadium.
Jeez.
And so we just have 9 left. But it's been a really fun experience. It's really been what sort of has driven where we're going on different trips and vacations. And so it's been a really great way to see the country. There's a lot of towns that we may not have went to had we not been going there for baseball. And so it's been great. We always try to also see the various sites in and around the cities, and usually try to do some other things so it's not, completely baseball centric. My daughter didn't really used to like baseball very much, and so she would just kind of sit there and color or something like during the game. But we would go to like an art studio or museum or something, and she would really like that. But now she's come to become a huge baseball fan. She knows more about it than a lot of people, and so she loves going to the games. And so that's been a really neat evolution to see as well.
Yeah, I bet. That's really cool. And you're definitely breaking more than 3 per year.
Yeah, we've gotten ahead.
Yeah, 5 years, and really only 4 because of COVID. So 4 years and 21 of them. That's just over. That's what 5.25 per year.
Right.
You're smoking it. You're cruising along. So, what are you still missing, and what has been your plan to try to get those last 9?
Yeah, now they're kind of like a smattering in different parts. We've got like Seattle and a couple in Texas. We have Miami. We have Toronto. We still have one more in Chicago. So they're kind of like, now they're sort of spread around. We still have to go to San Francisco, Oakland. Oakland's going away. They're getting moved to Las Vegas. So they probably won't make it to actual Oakland. But so, yeah, they're kind of still scattered around. So that's, again, how we sort of plan some of our various trips. We have really prioritized travel as a family, and this has been a big piece of that. But the last 2 or 3 years, we've traveled like 6 to 8 weeks a year, and that's really cool. Mostly as a family. And so that's been really great. I mean, we have lived simply for the most part otherwise in our kind of personal expense fields, and travel is where we have chosen to invest. It's a great way to spend family time, to unplug. We're very much in the public eye in the work that we do, and we love being around our hometown, but also it's sometimes great to get away, to get some space, to get inspired by what others are doing in other communities. And so that's been kind of our outlet.
That's awesome. Yeah. You mentioned, I don't know if it was pre-call or on this call, but a Fambundance trip with your family. Which one did you go to? And then tell me about that.
Yeah, so there's a great story around that. So we went this past January to Lake Tahoe, Fambundance event, and we really enjoyed it. Loved meeting the other families that were at that event. But we signed up in October or November to go to the trip at the end of January. And I knew that Lake Tahoe was like big for skiing. And I was talking to a friend at a local GoBundance meetup in November. And he was like, man, my family just started skiing a few years ago. We ski together. It's been great. It's like great, like riding the lift with the kids and like spending that time together. And I was like, man, that does sound really great. I was like, I think I want that for our family. And so I went home and announced to my wife, I said, like, I really want us to learn how to ski. And she was like, okay. What do you propose? I'm like,
we've got 3 hills in Ohio, just so you know.
Exactly. That might be an overstatement. But I was like, we're going to get the kids skis for Christmas. We're going to like do lessons. And I want our goal to be like to ski for real when we go to Lake Tahoe at the end of January. And she said, okay. I mean, you've done crazier things, so I've been along for the ride for that. So we'll go for it. So we gave our kids skis for Christmas. They were like so excited. And we went out for our first lesson like shortly after New Year's. And we had like 3 weekends to learn how to ski before we went to Lake Tahoe. And like, long story short, we did it. And we also did like an all-day ski school out at Lake Tahoe, which was awesome. It was more breathtaking than what I imagined it would be up there. And like, we really actually skied. But one like quick story, just again, the great dad story. Like, so we went out for our very first lesson at one of the, yes, not so big hills in Ohio. And we were doing the lesson, and we had like been on the, it's not even like a bunny slope. It's just like the very slightly tilted area that has like the belt. And so we'd been in that area kind of learning how to not fall for like most of our lesson, and which is really humbling to a 40-year-old guy. And, you know, to just be looking like Bambi when there's like all these little kids that are like whizzes on their skis. And we're getting towards the end. We're starting to feel confident. We weren't falling. We're like, our instructor was like, do you want to do, you know, one run down the slightly bigger hill, which was actually much bigger than this just slanted area.
Of course.
And so we're like, yeah, let's try it. Kids, you want to do it? Yep, let's do it. And so we got up to the top. We struggled to get over. And my son just like points his ski straight down the slope and just takes off flying and like completely loses control, like wrecks, you know, skis go flying. He, you know, flips over and is laying on the ground. I get down there to him, and he's, you know, kind of crying and just scared and is in terrible shape. He looks at me, he says, "Dad, that was completely terrifying. I am never going to ski again." And I looked at my wife and I said, "I think we've made a terrible mistake." Like, I might have like just went a little too hard, too fast on this, you know, because again, we had bought all this gear, and I mean, we were like all in. And so I was wise enough to just kind of like usher everyone back to the car. We drove home quietly, you know, had some music playing, and just like, we'll deal with this later. And it ended up actually being a really awesome teachable moment. And really the whole skiing experience was this just like perfect opportunity to have these conversations about falling down, getting back up. I played the grit TED Talk for my son, the Angela Duckworth grit TED Talk for my son on our way over to our second lesson. And we talked about grit and like what it meant to just like keep going when it was hard. And it was just, it really was all of these conversations strung together where we were able to talk about failure and then how you have to fail on your road to success. And so it actually ended up being great. And now my kids love to ski, and they've both gotten better than my wife and I already in one winter. But so anyway, that was all kind of started from committing to go to this Lake Tahoe GoBundance trip. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I've been trying to preach to my sons, like, failure is it's an event, not a person. You will never be a failure. You have failing moments.
Absolutely.
But it's only a failure if you don't learn from it. You get back up, you move forward.
Yeah.
It is what it is. Right. And that's one of the things that, you know, when he's riding his dirt bike, when he was like, I don't know, 6 years old, 5 years old, he crashed into a tree. I'm done, Daddy. I'm done. We're never doing this again. I said, no, we totally are. Like, literally right now, because you got to ride the dirt bike back to the house, and I'm not going to let you stop at the moment that you just crashed into a tree. And those are the types of moments, like you said, they're so teachable when they go through a heartache and they go through a hard time. And I'm thinking that, you know, even later on in life, when there's a hard time with a friend, something goes wrong with a friend, like, this is another teachable moment. We get to have these conversations and, you know, dig into what this actually means and what it can mean for growth and how you can get better. And that's one thing I do love about FamBundance too, is like it's families getting together talking about this. The first FamBundance I went to was a Tahoe one a couple years ago.
Okay.
I was not able to make it. My wife wasn't able to get the time off at this past one. I was very sad. I went to Tahoe myself, but I wasn't able to bring the family. But yeah, that we did a ropes course that time a few years ago, and it was so much fun watching my son go through this ropes course. And like, we built like this little ice castle afterwards, we climbed through an ice castle. We didn't build it; it was already built. and doing all, like, it was just so much fun watching them come out of their shell and do different things. And we're going to be going again in January. I don't know if you're going to Vermont. Are you doing that one?
Yeah, we haven't officially committed, but we have talked about one. Yes, that is our intention to go.
Well, it's time to commit. So we're going to pause the podcast right now. You're going to get on. You're going to go purchase it. But I actually haven't bought the FanBundance one. I finally just got clearance on what I'm going to be able to do. We've got the au pair as well, and I was like, I don't know what I pay for, like coming in with like an au pair and a baby, and I don't like so.
Yeah.
But we've got it all figured out now, so I'll be jumping on purchasing it. I've already bought for the men's event, but not the FanBundance one. But so they love skiing as well, and Adam has tried skiing and snowboarding, and he has yet to figure out which one he likes best. And my youngest has only really tried, or my youngest boy has only really tried skiing at the moment. So we'll see. I've got a snowboard that's going to be passed down from his brother, but those moments of just crashing on the hill or doing different things, and like, just it's a lot of fun to just work through those. And there's tears, and it's difficult, and it's it works on our patience too, especially when I'm hungry. Man, if I'm hungry, my patience is gone. I gotta bring snacks on the mountain.
My wife brings the snacks. That's the important thing.
Yep, smart
absolutely.
wife. Yes. Yeah. Key to a man's heart is through his stomach. Yep. So bring the snacks. So when you were at FanBundance, what was your biggest takeaway, you think, with the family and your kids?
Oh man. I think that it was really great for our kids to see that, like, we're not the only crazy ones. I think that was like a really great opportunity for them to see, like, wow, there is like other families that kind of do crazy stuff. Like they're running businesses, they've got real estate, they travel, they work on personal development, they wear Oura rings, you just like weird stuff that like they don't see a lot with their friends from school or whatever. So that was something that was, I think, a real eye opener for them. And then it was just a good opportunity for us to get together with other families, and then also have family time ourselves, talking about things like goals and family values, and when are the times when we're at our best as a family, and what do we admire about each other, and things like that again, maybe we don't always just bring up in day-to-day conversation. We talk about that a change of pace plus a change of place equals a change of perspective. And so that's why I go to various conferences and GoBundance events and things like that, because it does often give that different change up on perspective and helps us to zoom out. And so to be able to do that individually as family members and then also together as a family was a great experience.
No, I really like that. Change of pace plus change of place equals a different perspective. Change of perspective. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
If only I was there for it.
I know.
We did. We went out to Montana last summer for it, and it was just a lot of fun watching the boys light fires and go do things. Absolutely love it. But so tell me, as you're building all this stuff out and you're doing all these things, what is your next level of pure and actual involvement in the business that you want them to do? Or actually, let me rephrase this. I think I want to go a different direction. What have your kids expressed interest in inside the business in wanting to do next inside the family business stuff?
Yeah. We're trying to figure that out exactly. My daughter just really enjoys working. She's a hard worker, and she loves going with her mom to the toy store. She loves running the register. She loves helping unpack merchandise, and like, she is a worker. My son is just different as kids are, and he enjoys more hearing and learning about the actual business principles, talking about, again, that stuff like margins and different things that are interesting. And so like I think he has more of like he's looking for hacks. I think that, it's sometimes I think that he may enjoy business or pursue something that way just because he doesn't want to have to go get a real job. I don't say that in a disparaging way. I mean, I don't either. But
Yeah.
he sees us working hard, and so hopefully we're building that work ethic as well. My daughter seems to have a little less interest at this time. I mean, again, she's 11 years old. In having a small business or something, she's talking about more traditional career tracks like nursing or teaching or something like that. But what is important to me is that they at least understand it. And if they consciously choose that they feel that their calling and their life's work is doing something that would require them to be a W-2 employee, then I'm going to, of course, be supportive in that. But I also hope that they go into it like eyes wide open and they understand what we do, why we do it, the benefits of doing it, and they definitely see the drawbacks of doing it as well. And so I want them to totally get the small business thing. And then similarly, like from a real estate standpoint, I also say my daughter wants to become a teacher. I would support that, but I think would encourage her to buy up a little bit of real estate and to help enhance her income and her wealth generating capacity from that perspective, and to see that opportunity and to be able to take that and run with it and use what she's learned or use me as a resource to help her navigate that process, whether it's house hacking or buying a rental or being part of some sort of opportunity that way. So I think that there's lots of opportunities we want to expose them to, and then what they do with that is ultimately, of course, up to them.
Nice. Yeah. I do my best not to force it down, like wherever. Right. And I say that as I'm saying all these things that I'm even going to include in their school. But but at the same point, again, I want them to be exposed to it. Like I want to find their interest, and I love that you have noticed the difference between your two kids' interest and what motivates them one way or another. Because we can, that's one of the things I love about the idea of homeschooling is I can tailor to where they're at and what their desires are, what they want to learn. Like if all of a sudden they want to learn about Egyptian history for the next month, we could dig deep into Egyptian history. It's not, okay, well, that's this week's lesson. Next week is something else. Like, no, like, what the heck? We can dig into this. This is one of the things you're interested in. Let's dig into it. Let's learn, If learning about margins and supply and demand is what you want to learn, then guess what? Let's do it. If you want to learn about whatever, I mean, I think that's awesome. Do you think that... what were the signs necessarily, or is it more just evident just in general, like that you said, okay, well, I think that Olivia is going to go down this path and Emerson is going down this path, and did you catch on to some of that a lot earlier, just in their ethic as younger kids, or was it more like, hey, as they grew up, they were just like, boy, I hate that, and like, was it more conversational that we got to expose this stuff, or just through experience that you got to expose this stuff?
Yeah, probably a little bit of both. I mean, I would say that it's especially been showing up over the last few years that we talk about it. We openly discuss do you think you'd be interested in having a small business, or do you think that rental properties are of interest to you? And just asking those questions, and it's pretty typically like my son is like, well, yeah, I think I'd like to do that. It sounds really, really interesting. And my daughter's just kind of like, nah, probably not. So, yeah. But again, I think I'm not allowing that to crush me or anything by any means. I mean, first of all, again, it's her decision, but also, how many kids have you heard that, I've heard the story tens of times, dozens of times, where people that have been involved in small business, they swear off that they're never going to be involved in the family business. They go off to college, they move out of state, and then they're like the prodigal son or something, where they're like, you know what, I would have it really good, being part of the family business. And I actually do kind of like hanging out with my parents. So we could maybe work together or whatever. And then they come back full circle. I've got a few different friends that have told me that exact story, almost verbatim. They're like, I had no desire to be part of it. And then I went out into the world, and then I decided I actually like living around my hometown, and I like working as part of the family business, so they come back around. So those are neat experiences to
It goes
watch.
back to that, like we're so wise when we're teenagers and we know everything, and then you get out in the real world and you realize, well, I don't know anything. Like, I completely understand why they're doing what they're doing now. And I totally want to be a part of the family business. But I haven't, I mean, again, 8 and 4, the 3-month-old, obviously I'm excluding as part of this particular portion of the conversation because she has, there's nothing exposed right now other than the fact that she likes to eat and sleep.
Me too.
But yeah, I know, I'm already tired. I don't quite know where the boys are fitting in yet, still trying to feel it out. And I always fear that if I talk too much about certain things that I'm going to start forcing in a certain direction, and I don't want that to be the case. Because I get excited. I like to talk about business. I like to talk about what I'm doing. I like to show them things. And, I don't want it to get to the point where they're like, Dad, never again. I don't want to hear this, because I want them to learn it. But there is always that fear that it's too much, that they're going to be just, feel like they're being forced into it or something. And I never want that to be the case. I want them to make their own decisions. So
it is a fine line, I think, where you just gotta. It's hard to know. I mean, it's like so many things in parenting. There's no perfect black and white answer, but what's fascinating is like what kids pick up on, perceive, and hear just in the course of being around you. If you're talking about business, if they overhear you on the phone, if you're talking with your wife about a business deal or a problem team member or something like that. And I mean, my kids pick up on it all the time. I don't think that they are. They'll mention something later. So it's interesting just being around it. They're picking it up. And then, I think it's hard to know exactly how much education is appropriate, but I think we probably sound like both err a little bit on the side of like, well, it's going to be good for you to learn about it. And what you do with it as time goes on is up to you, but this is a big part of our family life. And, let alone the fact that perhaps there may be a day where you are called upon to steward the assets that we have acquired, and you need to have the wisdom, the character, and the education to be able to handle that, or else it will crush you. And so from that perspective, I do think that it's important that they learn at least the basics. Again, they don't need to maybe be in all the weeds of all the different things, but I believe strongly that as much of my job, if things go as we plan, we're going to build some wealth over our lifetime, and we're still deciding and kind of evolving on our thought process with what we're going to do with that. But there's a point in time likely that our kids will have access to some of that, and I don't want it to be a hindrance. We haven't worked so hard and tried to be wise all this time and through our lives to just allow it to be a curse to our kids because they don't know how to handle it, or they don't have the character to handle it. And so I do think that we have a responsibility to at least educate them from that perspective.
I completely agree, and I think you're on the right track for sure. And even just getting them involved, understanding work ethic, seeing how you interact with your employees, seeing how one thing that you said that really stuck out to me, and I took a note if I can find it on all of my notes. Yeah, we're not over our people, we're under our people, and you're supporting them. There, it can often feel like, especially as the owner of the business, that they're working for you, and but if it wasn't for the employees, we wouldn't have a business, right? So
absolutely,
it instilling that early, I think, is extremely important. So I think you're definitely on the right track in doing that. And I think that what I often say is if my son wants to join the military like I did, great. I want him to know that that it's an option, not the only option.
Right.
I didn't know there were other options. I just said that that's what I'm going to do. So that's why I joined the military. I want them to be exposed to the fact that the world is your oyster. You can do whatever the heck you want to. Like, if you want to go be a doctor, if you want to go in the military, if you want to be a pilot, if you want to run businesses like Dad, if you like whatever, like just know that there's options, and I'm here to support you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great perspective for sure.
But we'll see how effective it is. I don't know. Time will tell.
Yeah, exactly. As on a lot of these things. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
I sound really good right now. In 10 years, and you come and look at me and you're like, yeah, way to go, Adam. You might want to delete those old podcasts. But Luke, I want to ask you if there's anything you would like to ask me, anything that we haven't covered that you want to talk about, anything that maybe we've missed, anything that you're like, hey, I really wanted to chat about this today, anything you got on your side?
Man, I appreciate the opportunity to talk from this perspective. There's a lot of discussion out there about business and real estate and the things that we're interested in, and there's lots of content, but I would say less so about being a dad. And it's one of our most important jobs, if not our most important job, aside from being a faithful, committed husband. And I do say that I will clarify the order. So I remember when we were in premarital counseling, my wife and we went and did premarital counseling. We actually had two different pastors that were part of our wedding ceremony. We did premarital counseling with each of them. One of them, we went to his office for a session, and right behind him on his, the bookshelf, similar to what you have there behind you, and there was a little sign that said, "The best thing that a father can do for his children is to love their mother." And I remember seeing that as a 2-year-old and thinking, oh, I don't know if I agree with that. That seems kind of I feel like there's a lot more things that a dad should do for his kids. But man, as my life has went on, and I have seen carnage in families, and I've experienced my own, challenges and dynamics with my wife and kids, I see the wisdom in that. And so I do, not that you can't be a good dad if you're not with your children's mother, but if there's still an opportunity to do that, and it is a commitment, and it's hard, but it is one of the very best things we can do for our kids. So, but it's great to have this opportunity to just talk about some of these things and to compare notes, and to I think hopefully both be reassured that we're not getting it too wrong, and that we're at least on the right track, and that we step off the path, we make some mistakes, but then we get back on it, and we're doing it with intention. And I think that that's really important, that when we set our minds that this is something that's important to us, and we support it with our calendar, and we make the time for our families and for our kids, that we'll get the right results over time. So, I hope that there's somebody out there that needs encouraged in that. Maybe they've made some mistakes, as I have for sure. That then if you're still being a dad today and you're giving it your best, what's done yesterday is over with, and we have today that we can make a difference. So let's do it to the best of our ability.
I love that. Thank you very much for those words, Evan. It's that's spot on. And the same thing I usually say: God, wife, then my kids. Right? I mean, then anything else after that. So, if I want to strongly encourage folks that to like you were saying, to really keep that relationship with your spouse strong. Like, it is not easy, especially when you have kids running around. Especially I mean, you got businesses, you got kids, you got all sorts of stuff. If the relationship with your wife starts going, the rest of it starts going too. It's bound to happen. And I think in society today, we've looked at marriage too much as just a social situation, as opposed to an actual covenant with your spouse. It's just it's so easy to just get a divorce, no big deal. No, it should be very difficult to get a divorce, because it should be something that just irks you inside to have to go through that, because you have an actual commitment to your spouse. And again, I know that it's not easy. I've my wife and I both being military for quite a while and being across the world from each other at different spots and different things going on and all sorts of craziness and having kids and being deployed while having kids and all. Like, I mean, I get it. Like it is not easy. But it doesn't get easier by avoiding it and ignoring it. So just, so put in the dedication to your wife, just like you do into your business, and it'll thrive. So
absolutely.
But Luke, I really appreciate you jumping on. It was great getting to know you a little bit more and chat with you. If somebody wants to reach out to you, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, or maybe invest in one of your projects, what's the easiest way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can reach out through our website, henrydevelopmentgroup.com. It's Luke at henrydevelopmentgroup.com. If you want to shoot me an email, contact. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn. Happy to connect that way, stay in touch with good people. So, yeah, I really love the opportunity here to chat, and thank you again for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Luke. It was an absolute pleasure. And like you said, I think we both kind of helped each other realize that we're at least on the same path. We'll find out later if it's the right path, but at least we know we're on a similar path. So, but stick around for a second, but yeah, everybody else, thank you so much. I hope you really enjoyed the conversation, just like I did. There are many times in these conversations that I almost forget that we're recording. I just enjoy getting to know people a little bit deeper and talking about this stuff. And I hope that anybody listening also enjoys it. So if you are enjoying it, please let us know, whether it's liking, commenting, subscribing, all that type of stuff. It would mean a lot to me. So thank you again, Luke. Thank you, everybody listening. And we'll see you guys on the next show.